to create a nation that conduces to the greatest happiness of the greatest number of people. That is what a constitution must be. And having set the objective of the constitution, you then frame a constitution to achieve that objective.
Because we really do have a race problem. Those divisions are real. We see it in our politics, we see it in our trade union. We see that they take the divisions with them. Look at where people live in this US. You have enclaves in the Bronx and in Richmond Hill and in Brooklyn. They're taking the division with them.
Women are dying in the streets, and we have a government pontificating running around campaigning for women's vote. No women should vote in this election coming up unless there is something done to the legislation as Magistrate Kim is advocating.
That voices like ours that are not in the political trench fighting it out, voices like ours should become stronger. One of the things about the Caribbean is that we have never had one discourse. Bass will know the days of the New World and the Old World and the radical left and so on. What we had was this concourse of ideas, which I think in the early days of independence pushed us in a certain direction. We've got to move back to that point of having these multiple discourses.
Good evening, and welcome to today's program of A Vision for a New Guyana. Today I want to conclude on my discussion on constitutional reform, my proposal for Guyana, and in doing that, that will bring us to the end of my presentation for constitutional reform. Now, what is going on in Guyana today tells us that constitutional reform seems to be a must. Because what is happening now is we don't seem to understand our own constitution. And that's the problem. The issue is the CCJ made a ruling. The government interpreted in one way, and the opposition interpreted another way. And that has been our problem since the inception of the birth of our country. We seem to not be able to understand basic English language, and of course the lawyers are telling us that, oh, the interpretation that means something else, and that's the problem. We are working on a constitution that the government and the opposition are seeing two different things. How long are we going to continue with that? It has not worked, period. And if it has not worked, Guyanese, we need to throw it where it belongs, in the dustbin. And I'm appealing to you to please work, let us work together. We need a new dimension. We need a new direction for Guyana. Yesterday, the Chief Justice ruled on whether the GCOM should continue with the house-to-house registration or not. We all know, and that's why I'm also surprised with the opposition, it is never unconstitutional to have house-to-house registration. That's a fact. The question is, we are not living in a normal election cycle. This new election should have been held since March 21 of this year. But because the government had a problem with math, and now the problem with math is over, we now have a problem with English language. What will be the next problem? And we're having these problems because our institution does not work. Guyanese, you gotta get out of this slumber that you're in. Get out of, wake up. Wake up. What we are going through in Guyana should not have happened if institution worked. It is not working. So I'm asking you tonight, let us join forces. Let us change the dynamic. We need a new revolution. We need to do things differently. Listen, the British ruled us, and the British interest was basically to take as much as they possibly could for Great Britain. And they did that. The British divided us and rule. Divide and rule. That has been their mantra in countries where there are different ethnic groups that they control. And at one time, as we all know, in the British Empire, it says the sun never set. Because when one part of the world is day, the other part is night. And when that night turns day, the other part is night. So the sun never set in the British Empire. But what they did in those countries that are, and this is not a racist statement, the countries that are more Caucasians, the white countries, they treated differently than they treated countries with different ethnic groups. And if you're the same ethnic group, what do you think they did? They divide us by religion, they divide us by tribe, they divide us by whatever means possible in order to get control over us. But that's the past. It did not work. Then come independence, we had 28 years of the PNC in office. What happened in those 28 years? What is there for us to be proud about after 28 years of PNC rule? There's some achievement, of course. Any government will have to give some achievement. Credit to the PNC, we had the Quarantine Highway. We had the West Demerara Highway. We had the Linden Highway. We had the Demerara Harbor Bridge. There are achievements, no doubt. But we also had long lines for even of milk. I remember in Georgetown. You're seeing a line, you don't know what is being served there, but you just join the line. I remember going in a line, at the end of the line, they're giving milk. Not sharing, you're buying milk, of course. The tin milk from Canada, the Canada Best. And you feel like you're top of the world when you get a tin of milk. That is what we went through in Guyana in 28 years of PNC rule. We had to go to Hope Estate. If you don't go, you're fired from your job. All public ministries, corporations had the PNC flag flying. Those are the realities. This is not with ethnicity. That's the reality. What can we be proud of in 28 years of PNC? The British divided us, and guess what? After independence, more division. Or the division continue now at a higher level. So the PNC perceived to be an African government. Most of the African Guyanese had priority. A few Indians had priority as well. 1992, we had new elections, free elections after 28 years. What happened after that? What is there to be proud of again? The only thing that we can be proud of is that our country is more divided. Is that something to be proud of? The PPP in office, what they did do for Guyana? Talking to the man in the street, they said money was circulating, and that is true. But was it the real economy, or was it the underground economy? Those are questions we have to ask ourselves. So even though money was circulating under the PPP, was it blood money or was it good money? Those questions need to be answered. We have seen all the killings under the PPP. Was it justifiable? How can you have an extrajudicial killing when you have a police force who is supposed to maintain law and order? Should we be proud of that? The PPP did some good things, as I mentioned earlier. In the early days of Cherry Jagan, we had the Black Bush Project. That was marvelous. We had the University of Guyana started under Cherry Jagan. The Berbice Bridge was built under the PPP government, but that's a different scenario. Look, let's compare Berbice Bridge with Demerara Bridge. Demerara Bridge, you can cross that bridge for $200. Cars pay $100. The Berbice Bridge, you need to pay a lot more to cross that bridge. So the dynamics are different. Under the PPP, they built a factory at Skeldon that is a white elephant, $200 million US. Who's paying for that? So Guyanese, I don't want you to look at race, please. Look at the reality. We need to get out there in the thousands and march on the street, not against the government or against anything else, but against policies. We need a reformation in our country. The church in the early years had a reformation. The church was reformed. I think Guyana needs that. There is really very little to be proud about being Guyanese. Guyanese, come on, wake up. Get up from your slumber, get up from your sleep. We need to take back our country. And these politicians we have now, both in the government and opposition, they're a backpack of thieves. That's all they are. Look at the president of Guyana. I wish him well in his recovery of his illness. But every time the president leaves to go to Cuba, how much is it costing the taxpayers? Yet there are so many thousands of Guyanese who are sick. And you go to Georgetown Hospital and you can't see a doctor. You got to go to a private hospital that costs you a fortune. Yet the government, or those who control the government, gets everything on taxpayers' sweat. Is that what we want in Guyana? The thing about being a Guyanese is that, and always one of the solutions is keep it as it is. If it's not broken, why do you have to fix it? But Guyana, my friends, is broken. And Guyana need to be fixed. I'm calling on all of you. Please, call in the program. Devin will give you the number. Call in, let's talk. Let's talk on issues that affects us. Send a comment so we can discuss it. Together, we need to move Guyana forward. I want you to join us. I want to join with you for a new Guyana. Guys, let's face the fact. When the president leaves office, and we have 3 presidents that has left office, Bharat Jagdeo, Samuel Hines, Donald Ramutar, they're getting, for the rest of their life, 7/8 of the current earning of the president. Whatever the president's salary is of the president, these 3 individuals are getting 7/8 of that. As president, they travel the world on taxpayers' money. They're protected by taxpayers' money. They have their cars paid by taxpayers' money. Everything that they do is paid by you and I. Yet when they retire, when they come out of office, whether they get out of office by election or not, they are given 7/8 of whatever the salary of the president is as their pension. the Prime Minister, Hamilton Green. He's also getting 7/8 of the current salary of the Prime Minister. What about the public servants? What about the police officers? What about the teachers? What about the guy who gave his life in the estate back then, cutting cane and digging the drains, throwing fertilizer? What happened to those people? What happened to the charwoman who cleaned the office and cleaned the toilet so we can go into a place that is habitable? When they retire, what do they get? Do they get 7/8 of the salary of the current office holder? Does a police officer get 7/8 pension of the officer that replaces him or her? Does a teacher get 7/8 as pension of the current teacher's salary? Does the charwoman get 7/8 of the pay that the current charwoman gets as her pension when she leaves, when she retires? Guyanese, if it's applicable to the politicians who live on our backs, it is good for all Guyanese. Guyanese, you got to wake up. Please, you need to wake up. If not, they will take you for a ride. And guess what? These politicians are the best of friends. I want to welcome Colin Haynes, a good friend of mine. We were trying to get him on before, so he's now on. Colin, welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be on the show. And thank you
All
for
right.
having me.
I was talking about what is going on in Guyana and the nonsense that is going on with our politicians, what they take for themselves on taxpayers' money, and the rest of us, the rest of the people in the country, they get basically crumbs under the table. Now, Colin has a master in public health. Colin was supposed to be employed in Guyana. He campaigned for the AFC. Going into government, like I also campaigned for the AFC. I worked for the election. We all did something for the AFC and, of course, APNU. But today we are ashamed to say that we are part of AFC and APNU because of what is going on in our country. They promise so many things in the manifesto. What has happened? And we will talk about something constitutional reform later today. But Colin, I just want to welcome you and tell our audience a few things about yourself.
Thank you for having me on the show again. I was originally born and raised in Guyana, and grew up very humble beginnings. My very diverse community in Linden, and went to school there, went to high school, went to primary school, high school, nursery school, migrated to the U.S. and studied. I got a bachelor's of science in biochemistry and international relations, and also I have a master's in public health. Recently, I finished my master's in business administration, and in the process, I've also done some work home in Guyana, as you say. I've worked in ear HIV, which is my passion, and public health. And currently, I work for major health systems as a consultant, as a healthcare consultant, doing implementations for the electronic medical records. So, like I said, my connection to Guyana has always been pretty stable and committed. I'm always committed to a better and brighter Guyana. And any way I can contribute will definitely be a great asset.
Okay, we have a comment on the screen. Barbara is saying, I do not think he's living in this country. You should come here and enjoy the good life that his administration has now. What do you think of Barbara's comment? Is there a good life now in Guyana?
Look, I think that anyone that you talk to, there's going to be a debate on both sides of the spectrum as to what a good life is and a good life should be. I'm not going to be the first or quick to say that things haven't improved. I mean, certainly reading the newspaper and talking and even visiting Guyana too. Some things have improved, Charles. There are places in Guyana that never had water before, now has water. Places before that didn't had light, has light. People who didn't had certain basic amenities, water, light, housing, they have improved. But that is not to say that we have reached the zenith of things. I think we can do more, and I think in our leaders we should expect more, and we should expect. We're not expecting them to do. My thing has always been, my position has always been, they're not going to do everything today or it's going to happen overnight. But we want to see, I think most Guyanese people want to see a clear path to how we get there. And that's essentially thing. How do we improve our healthcare? How do we increase literacy in Guyana? How do we address some of the socioeconomic issues, putting more money in people's pocket by reducing income tax or reducing VAT or the threshold? Or how do we deal with this big, new, exciting industry called the oil industry? These things, I think, we're not expecting things to happen overnight, but we're expecting to see a clear path to which can show that there's going to be growth and development for our people.
Excellent, Colin. And I'm glad you mentioned oil and gas. The thing is, today I was, in yesterday's papers, Bloomberg had a good report about Guyana in terms of the OPEC countries. And we are really, one of the countries that will hopefully be in OPEC. The thing is, right now, Guyanese are not trained for this oil and gas sector. So I'm not seeing that the urgency of the government to really talk about what are they going to do to train Guyanese. Are we going to train them in Guyana? Are we going to send them overseas to get some experience overseas? What is going on? That's not happening. What are we going to do after oil starts flowing next year?
So, Charles, I think there was a deficit. Look, I've said this before. 1999, we knew that we were going to get some. Well, even if we were not going to get oil as well, we knew that we were on track to start exploration for oil. So 1999 to now, it's about 20 years ago. And so I believe that 20 years ago, we would have had at least 100 to 200 petroleum engineers who were trained outside. I think most of them would have gone on to get some experience in the oil industry. And now that we struck gold, we struck oil, we would have been able to have them now come back and bring their services to Guyana. But I think there was poor oversight in the previous government. I'm not the one to sit here and blame governments for who did what and who did that. But that was something that's poorly planned out. If we knew we were having some intention to drill, we should have already had at least 100, 150 petroleum engineers or people who can jump into the oil sector 20 years after. Don't you think so?
Yes and no, because in 1999, and I'm not bashing any one of the government, 1999, it was only exploration. We did not know if we were getting oil or not. The time when we knew we were getting oil was in 2015. So from 2015 to now, at least we should have had some training. The training really started then and speed it up. Whether we go to Exxon itself, or we go to ESSO, or we go to someone so that they can hands-on training. So at least, there's so many different components that, you need to understand. And look at the contract. Exxon will give us a whole lot of paperwork. Who will analyze those paperwork? We need geologists, you need accountants, you need economists, you need all these people to really go through those information. You need, as I said, petroleum engineers. We don't seem to be heading in that direction, and that's my problem. Are we depending on the Trinidadians to come, maybe? Are we depending on, countries that has the resource that we can buy into them and come and do it? I don't know what the plan is.
Well, Charles, look, I think that, like I said, I work in an industry where, and I know in many industries, nothing, even with Exxon drilling, nothing happens overnight, meaning that there is some planning that goes into place before these things happen. And if we were supposed to have an oil industry, I think we should have at least had about 10 to 15 years of pre-planning for this, meaning that we might not have known if we were gonna, like I said, strike gold on it, but we should have already started making plans. So if we get it, what do we do? Do we have a trained, competent people for every different sector? What do sectors look like? How does a sector overlap? How do we, improve on the existing sectors we have? Because you still have to improve healthcare, you still have to improve education and social benefits for people. So how do we move closer to improving this so that when we struck oil, when forest oil came, we would be in a better position to make this happen. And so I am somewhat disappointed that we've gotten to the stage now where in 2015 we finally found out we're getting oil, and it's just about 4 years before time. It's too late. I mean, countries usually, by standard, like I said, plan 10 to 15 years ahead. And so we found ourselves in a quagmire where we have to speed up, and then we have to now think about setting the rules for. So what we're trying to do is playing catch up here. We're now trying to set the rules, set everything in place, whether these things should have been in place or been the bedrock long time ago.
Yeah, Colin, we had two comments. One from Mohammed Bakshi said Guyanese will not get rich from oil. And Sharish Sugrim said that he knew of a lot of Guyanese who are training in Texas right now. So maybe there is some training. I hope that is the case. He said a lot of Guyanese out training in oil and gas. I know a few in Texas and elsewhere. But how much is a few? I mean, as you said, we need a couple hundred of different, engineers, and we need oil accountants and, things like that. We don't have that.
Right. And I know so I have some friends in Texas. I go down there periodically and we have discussions on oil and gas industry. And one of the things I think would have been a benefit is if we could have made this a little more inclusive in terms of there are people who worked in oil and gas. Lately, I've been following Mr. Mangal, who, is a Guyanese who has been working in the oil industry for a long time, along with many other people in Texas, established oil and gas experts. I think we're definitely missing the ball if we're not engaging them, if we're not bringing all the resources needed to come on board to make this a reality. And while we may have some of them training, we could bring in some of our experts who are from Guyana, who know the territory and who means well and who wants to contribute to our country in a way where I know there are friends of mine who want to just be able to come and give their services for free, but not given that opportunity. I think we're missing the ball there. We're missing a vital opportunity.
I totally agree. Everton have a really good statement. He says, as long as corrupt politicians have solidarity with one another and none of them serve jail time, nothing would change. What do you think of that statement? I think Everton is on the ball.
Look,
how many Guyanese politicians went to jail for corruption that you know?
Not many, but
I don't think any went to jail for corruption.
Yeah, like I said, I think that one of the things we have to do is move the conversation away from focusing on some of the more negative things, so more positive as what we can do to build. I think we spend a lot of time and energy on trying to focus on things that are not going to necessarily put us on that track. So I would want us to have a discussion on the Sovereign Wealth Fund. What do we do with the oil money? What do we do with the gas? My inclination is that the gas is the most precious thing, not the oil. That's to transform our economy. So we should have these conversations and push these conversations in our local. What's the environmental impacts, for Latam or for people in Ithaca or Shell Beach or some other place? So I think that there's so much to be done in this industry, and I'm by far nowhere close to being an expert. But I listen to what the people are saying, and I think that they need to have that voice out there.
Mahendra mentioned last week that we need to change our mindset. Are we too close in terms of looking at the broader picture, and we are not ready to let go of this backwardness that we've gone through for the last 50 years?
Well, look, Charles, let's put this into perspective. We got a resource that is gonna move us from a country that has a $2 billion economy to about within the first 5 years a $10 billion economy, and that's what the economists are saying, at least 5 times. And I think that what we need to do is we need to find ways on how we can be able to focus on moving this further. And look, a lot of people are sitting and thinking, the common man is sitting and thinking that oil is gonna be flowing in the drains or trenches in Guyana, money is gonna be flowing like that, and we're just gonna be able to just take it, and our money is gonna be shared out to us. Look, I think that right now the best advice we could do is to find something that you can do, and you can do it very well, and you can integrate that into the oil industry. For instance, let me give you an idea. A special shout out to I have some very talented and young entrepreneurs in Durban Backlands. Some of my friends, many people will know them. They have this barbershop on Mandela Avenue, right? It's right on the reservation. They do barbecue and they do barbershop and stuff. And I was having discussions in the barbershop, and I said to them when I go home, if you're a barber now, you can start a premier barber service where you're going to the oil rigs, where you're going to the offices, and you're cutting people hair at premier prices. These are some of the little things, Charles, that we can do. You know how to cut hair already, but how do you now cut hair for oil executives and their families and grow the economy and make that a business? And these are some of the kind of ideas we have to get.
The spin-off from the oil sector, yeah. The thing is, a lot of people, I'm glad Mr. Ramdas Singh is watching from my street in Lagrange, Bibi Rahina from Canada. So we have some viewers from all over the world. Yeah, the thing is, the oil sector will directly only employ so many people. But the spin-off from that sector will give us tremendous opportunities for everything else. And as Taran, Dr. Kemraj mentioned so many times, is the curse of the Dutch curse, as they call it, the Dutch disease, is that we are foregoing all the productive sector and hoping that oil will make us this super rich. As you said, oil flowing in the drains. That will not happen.
No.
So the sovereign wealth fund you talk about, it's important for us to know how that funds will be spent now, in the medium term and in the long term.
And also, Charles, look, there's so much of examples. I've read about Norway, and I've read about how China has looked at their sovereign wealth fund and what they've done with it. I'm particularly more fascinated by Norway. They have the biggest sovereign wealth fund. They call it the pension fund, because essentially what they're doing is they're saying that, look, oil is not always going to be the resource that is going to be here forever. But what they're doing, they're stacking a considerable amount of money that they can take in the future. Whether it's now at how many trillions of dollars they have, but they're putting all this money away that in time to come when there's no oil, they can actually start investing or pouring some of this money into their economy to do other things. So after oil, what's the next thing? And how do we invest in the next thing? And I think that that's what also we need to be thinking about in Guyana. Even now we're starting oil. 20 years from now, 25 years, if oil prices go down, or what happens if, for instance, we can't drill anymore, or there's not enough oil anymore? What do we do?
Yeah. Okay, Colin, stick up one pin there. We have to pay for our broadcast, so we need to go to our sponsors. And again, tonight we want to thank Supreme Quality Carpet Store. They're doing a really great job. They're now currently celebrating their 20th anniversary. For those who have called in to Steve to give their orders, we want to thank you. And for the rest of you, please call in, give Steve your order. They're very professional. You can call Steve on 718-206-9701 or on his cell 917-669-2593. For quality service, professional installation, please call Steve. They have a 20th anniversary sale. So for those who called in, we want to thank you. And for the rest of you, please call in Steve for your carpet. And then we have Sugrim and Associate, CPA firm here in New York, for all your personal taxes, business taxes, partnership, not-for-profit, estates and trusts, accounting and payroll service, anything to do with accounting, auditing, we can do it for you. We are also an agent of the IRS in case you're looking for a tax ID. Come to us with your identification, passport, whatever it is. We will verify the authenticity of it and then send your application for your tax ID. We have two addresses. One is at Hillside Avenue, 20507, Suite 24 in Hollis, and then 13501 Linden Boulevard in South Ozone Park. Call us on 929-460-5043. Okay, Colin. Let's switch gear a little and talk about our Constitution. Now, as I said in my opening ramble, the Constitution does really not work in the interest. And as Mr. Pandey from Trinidad and Tobago said, Constitution was supposed to work for the people. And if it doesn't work for the people, then we need to change it. Mm-hmm. The sad news is, I don't think the PPP and the PNC really want to change the fundamental problem with our Constitution. And one of it is the Article 177 2B. It says where there are two or more presidential candidates, if more votes are cast in favor of the list in which a person is designated as presidential candidate than in favor of any other list, that candidate shall be deemed to be elected president. And I think that cements our racial voting. Because I said, the Indian Guyanese believe if they vote as a bloc, the PP will win because they largely support the PP. The African Guyanese believe if they vote in a bloc for the PNC will become the president. And this article needs to be repealed. What is your view on that?
Look, I think that yes, over the years, constitutions are made to be changed. That's why we have a fully functioning and effective legislator who's able to take the Constitution and transform it into a way where it makes it easier to be able to carry out functions of the state and also to be interpreted by the judiciary. Now, as it relates to the changing of the lists and repealing the parts, I think the Constitution, in that case, for me, it's sort of a gray area. The Constitution, at best, sometimes, I believe, is to be left to lofty lawyers, who study constitutional law to be able to make pronouncements.
But they're the ones who put us in this mess. The lawyers are the ones who put us in this mess. Why you have to rely on them still to change the Constitution? They will not. Because the more twisted it is, and interpretation is vague, the better big bucks for the guys.
But I think, though, that the Constitution has to change to reflect the realities of 2019 and beyond. And certainly, I think that gone are the days where we're bound to this list system. I have discussions with some of my friends here who run for state legislators and run for local government in the United States, and they said, Colin, I'm so sorry for you because I know you want to be involved in politics, but we're bound to this list where we need to get onto that list. If you can't get up and say tomorrow I want to run for parliament or I run for president, in a more unified way and rally more people around you. And so I think that some of those things have to change. So what I would like to see is a constitution that gives parliamentary elections a reality, remove our dependency from the list system. I want to see one that gives clear instructions on some of the things of the day, like no confidence motions. How do we deal with that? What constitutes a majority? If we see like in constitutions of UK, New Zealand, Canada, or Australia, their constitutions have changed over the times to reflect that. You remember we were talking about recently about the no confidence of James Callaghan and Margaret Thatcher. And so Britain is made these changes over time. All these countries have made their changes over time to reflect that, the Constitution is a live thing. One of the
Precisely.
frustrating things is that our Constitution is kind of a static thing. It's kind of like it's dead. The Constitution needs to be a living organism, meaning that as a living organism, we change. I wasn't looking this way at 5 years old. You were not as well. I hope not. So it must reflect those kind of ideals and beliefs of our people. And I think our people are ready for it. I mean, it's causing us more heartache, looking at this whole situation with no confidence motion and GCOM. And I think if the Constitution was a living and a breathing mechanism, we could have solved some of these issues quicker.
I agree. Now, GCOM, talk about GCOM. That composition of GCOM, three of the government commissioners, three of the opposition, and hopefully independent chairman, that's not working. Because it seems to me that the government commissioners is in one direction, they're going in one direction. The opposition commissioner is going in a different direction. And the chairman in between was supposed to bring them together, and it doesn't seem to be working.
So yeah, the Carter formula. I mean, back in the days, back in 1992, when we were having a changeover in government, I think the Carter formula at that time was probably something good. But now the realities of the changes we have in our country, I think we're beyond the Carter formula. I think now we need to either find a way to have independent commissioners, independent of party, independent of bias, independent to be able to lead the people with a clear mind of dignifying our electoral system. And as to how that process can be done, there's a few ways. I mean, one of them could be just like how we appoint a chairman of GCOM to be able to just come up with at least and it can't be. I don't think the best thing to have is 6 people, because what we do is that we put ourselves in a position where the chairman of GCOM always have to be a tiebreaker. Right now, for instance, if the opposition believes one thing and the ruling party believes another, then effectively the chairman of GCOM gets the deciding vote all the time. And so the battle is always to have a GCOM chairman who is on your side. And I think that that's not being balanced. So we need to either have of 6 or 7 independent people who are able to administer to us the electioneering process in a more efficient and effective way.
And that's one recommendation that we are making in our submission, that the commission need to be independent, free from political interference. And I think, how is that going to be achieved? We can work on the modalities of it, but it need to be independent. The other thing, look at GCOM staff. GCOM got almost $6 billion. And their primary responsibility is to administer an election. Colin, most of the companies in Guyana don't have revenue of $6 billion. Even the big companies like Banks DIH, DDL, their revenue might be in that vicinity. But definitely not consistently. Like, okay, GCOM gets $6 billion this year to run an election. And you're telling me with $6 billion, the staff can't have a list available to do that? What is going on? In a private sector, they'll all be fired. I know that. But because this is, our system is, institution does not work. We need to get independent institutions.
Yeah. So I think that in order to get a functioning elections commission, I think like we need to, and I think I'm getting some kind of technical issues here. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So I think that I think you're right, Charles. Look, GCOM is well funded. I think it's a good thing for GCOM to be funded. But I think that we need more than ever. We have this way where we've been putting a lot of money recently into a lot of these state agencies. What is GCOM, GPL, GTNT, GWI? But I believe that coming back to it, we haven't got standard operating procedures. We haven't got a a manual, a follow guide, a roadway or a pathway to be able to efficiently and effectively move the organization together. And I think that's where the Constitution come in, and this is where constitutional change is so important because that
Exactly.
provides a roadmap. And in
Thank
the
you.
case
Yeah.
of this with GCOM and the money that you're having, I think it should be clearly stated out whether in the bylaws of GCOM or in the Constitution how monies are spent, how processes or procedures are taken care of. And we have bright guys like you who can help us in that way with the accounting and that kind of stuff.
But you see, Colin, that's the problem. If you have an independent professional board, guess what? They're responsible for the staff. So they will now recruit independent professionals to run the commission. It's not a rocket science. You have to prepare a list for elections. There's a process to do that list. That's all you're doing. What is the problem? So that needs to be changed in our constitution. The next thing, Colin, I want to talk about is what do you consider if we have a fixed date or a day for elections? What is your view on that? And for the
I
audience, can
don't.
you share your thoughts also? Maybe we can do a poll. Devin, sorry, Colin. Do we want a fixed day or fixed date for elections?
I would be open to a fixed date for election, and this is why I would be open to a fixed date. Looking at American democracy, which I think is one of the greatest democracies ever lived, there is a time where there's an election. So we have an election in November of every year, of every election year. And then there's a time where there's a swearing of a new president. And so what you have is about a 3 month period for one government to be able to hand over to a new government. It's called a peaceful handover of democracy or peaceful transfer of power, right? And so if we have August, as you are saying, we can make it August, February, whichever month, right? But
I was suggesting
by
August.
Right. So by November, right, we have a new president is sworn in. We have a period where the old government is able to walk the new government through some of the issues because I believe our system and our constitution is it puts us in a place where we're not prepared. Look at like for instance our last swearing in of our president. There was so much last minute, so much of things that we had to do to be able to get the president all the things that he needs to be able to get sworn in. I feel if we had a period in between after election and swearing in, so we set a date and use that date to be able to formulate a transition date from there on
Excellent,
out.
excellent, Colin. I really support that.
Yeah.
So maybe our audience can tell us if that is something. Ramdat is saying that India has 3 elections commissioner with 900 million people eligible to vote. I'm not sure it's 3, but India do have almost 900 million people who voted or eligible to vote, and they have a smooth election. The Elections Commission is very equipped there. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think we should have the election of the president if we maintain the president. My recommendation is we have a non-executive president and a prime minister, executive prime minister, but we can go through the modalities of that. But yet, after the election, you have time between the election, the declaration of the winner, and the swearing in. And during that time, that person, whoever is president or prime minister, can now send their ministers to training. So they have, at least by the time they get into government, they know exactly how things are run, how things are done.
Yeah.
So that it should be
Yeah.
really something we should talk about.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I said to you, I believe that way we set ourselves for success. I think one of the things the Constitution doesn't allow us to is to plan our democracy properly. The current Constitution makes our democracy very ad hoc. It makes it very on the fly. It makes it very last minute. It takes away planning. It takes away proper execution. And that's made up. It may have been great for 1980s, but it's not how we should be moving in
And as you said
2019
earlier,
and
it's a living document. It should be changed.
Yeah.
Mr. Ram Naresh is saying the Constitution should say how you qualify to be president, minister, and member of parliament. I think the constitution currently do have that qualification,
Yeah.
but I think we need to be maybe more specific, as Viraj is saying. The other thing, so a fixed date for election, something that we should consider in a new constitution. And of course,
Sure.
from the time of election, declaration of the winner, to the time of swearing in should also be a breathing space where
Yeah.
whoever the winner is can send they themselves need to go maybe some training, and their ministers that they want to be in government should go through that period of training as well before they
A
can be sworn in.
transition. It's called a transition
Yeah,
period.
excellent. Okay, now Parliament. Should Parliament be full time?
Absolutely. I think we need to have full-time parliamentarians who are not ministers. And I would think that our parliamentarians and our parliamentary structure needs to also be changed to reflect the steering of the executive and the judicial. In that, we'll have more committees that will have more oversight,
Yeah.
and we'll have people who are dedicated to be able to ensure that the political, social, and economic affairs of the country run properly.
Excellent. I'm also in agreement that Parliament should be full time. Now, 65 member Parliament. Do we need 65 members in Parliament?
I think we probably would find ourselves that probably we need 65, or we need less, or we need more. But I think it comes down to how many constituencies we divide the country into. We have 10 regions. Some regions are bigger than the others. So, for instance, Region 4, our biggest region, second biggest region is Region 6. We can't have, we can't have 10 people representing 100,000, but then we have the same 10 people representing 40,000. So I think that it needs to go by population, and needs to go by districts.
One of my recommendations, Colin, is a set number of people elect one parliamentarian. So my suggestion was, somebody was saying we have 7 or 8 or 7,000 people in Guyana, men, women, and children. So in the last 2 elections, in 2011 and 2015, for every top-up seat, the 40 top-up seat, actually it represents about 18,800 Guyanese, men, women, and children, the top-up seats. So one of the recommendations I'm making is, why don't we get a number, maybe 25,000, 30,000, 40,000, I don't know the number, we can talk about it. And we divide that by the number of people in Guyana, the 787, come up with a number of seats for parliament. So every parliamentarian, they will represent 20,000, 25,000, 30,000 Guyanese. And then we can now draw the line so it will straddle regions. So in Georgia, you said the more diverse, the more concentrated population, they would have more seats in parliament than, let's say, Berbice or Essequibo or Northwest, because of the concentration of people there. So I'm thinking of go back to the constituent basis, abolish the PR system, because we don't know who your politician is in a PR system. So if we go back to the constituent and then decide how many people in Guyana should elect one parliamentarian. What are your views of that?
Another way we can look at it, Charles, is we can roll out the PR system altogether. But what we can do is we can take the PR system and be able to appropriate it better based on population. So like we say, Region 4 or Georgetown has, give and take about 50 to 60,000 people, then they would get more seats based on the population. So maybe after every 10 to 15,000 people, we get a seat there. And so it makes it that amount. And then, a region like, maybe Region 9, that has maybe about 35,000 people, they can have maybe 2 representatives. And look, and this has to have, the Constitution also has to show how do we draw district mapping. So a lot of this has to be districts, and how do we map those districts, and then how we allocate seats to those districts. And it also must be giving the ability for them to be able to change over time, because populations grow. Region 9 is probably not going to be the same population, neither Region 4. So what mechanisms we have in place for it to continue growing, and then more seats will be added to the National Assembly that way, just like they do in the U.S.
Or more
Congress.
seats, or a larger number of Guyanese will elect a parliamentarian. So either way we can do it. Instead of 20,000, we go to 25,000 if population grow, for instance, or we go 35,000. So that can change as
Right.
well. Here in the United States, I know like about 500,000 Americans elect one congressperson, because of course we have 300 odd million people here. But the thing is, Guyana, we need to go back into that system, my recommendation is. And you're saying, don't abolish the PR immediately. How would you want to marry the PR with constituent?
So, like I said, I think what we need to do is we need to take the proportional representative system and marry it sort of an hybrid approach. So what we're doing here is we're saying that, and you've outlined it here, whether we want to say that we're gonna, for every 10,000 or 20,000 Guyanese, we give them so much representatives, or we increase that number over time, or we say that, and like I said, this is something rudimentary that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
But I believe that we have to sit down with people who are expert, who are able to do these kind of district mapping. Because I think to sit here and call numbers is kind of rudimentary. But I feel like
That's
if
correct.
we had a map, if we can map out districts, if we can see populations, if we can do population studies and population trends in Guyana, and Guyana population is growing, I think that we can definitely come up with a considerable number of people and have the proper representation.
I agree. And the thing is, with a constitutional reform, you need to go across the country and get the views of as many people as possible. And their input
Right.
will kind of program us into things. Colin, the discussion has been so good, but we're running out of time. So before we close, and I want to give you some last word to talk about. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, Sugrim and Associate, the CPA firm here in New York, for hosting this program, and also for carpet quality store, Supreme Quality Carpet Store, for Steve. Please give Steve a call. They're at 17611 Jamaica Avenue in Jamaica, New York, 718-206-9701. And Steve's cell number is 917-669-2593. Call them for your carpet. They do business, they do homes, they do industrial carpet, they do every area you think of. Their company will do it. They're very, very professional. Call them, and then Sugrim and Associate, LLC, Certified Public Accountants. Again, we do everything in accounting, in taxes, payroll. Give us a call, 929-460-5043. So, Colin, there's so much more for us to discuss tonight. I want to talk about the commissions, all the constitutional commissions, the composition of them. We think they should all be independent, like the Elections Commission, the Police Service Commission, the Public Service Commission. We shouldn't, I think in our new constitution, the politicians should not be the one who determine who should be the police commissioner, or who should be the chief justice, or who should be the chancellor. That should come from those independent commissions, because they'll be professional, they will do the evaluation and everything else. But again, our time is out, we couldn't talk about it. But next week, we will talk about economic development, and Colin will be here again next week, and I'll get someone else to be with us as well, so we can talk about how do we move Guyana forward. The Constitution, as Colin said, it's a breathing, living document, so we need to change it to reflect the new reality. And that is the cornerstone, basically the foundation. And as I said earlier, our country needs a reformation. Our politicians so far has failed us. We need a new dynamic. We need you young people. Colin, you got to lead this task, brother. We need all the young people to come on board. You're the ones who will determine Guyana's future. Colin, tell us a couple of words before we close.
Well, I'm a very optimistic, and I'm also a very a diligent student of history. And going back to 1776, and even before 1776, when the United States was being developed, the founding fathers met in Philadelphia. Back then, there was no air conditioners. There's history recalls women fanning them, so the conditions were not as great. But one of the things came out from the Constitutional Convention when all of the different delegations got up in a roar, because we had a country where they had 13 colonies, 13 different monies, 13 different armies, 13 different ways of doing different things. But George Washington got up at the Constitutional Convention and said, let us create a standard of which only the wise and honest can be repaired. And the hand
Amen.
of God is watching us. When I think of that quote, I think of our ability to take our Constitution and be able to diligently improve it to create a standard for our Guyanese people. Like I said, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, whether it's in social security, whether it's in economic development, or whether it's in our booming oil sector, I believe that we have to create standards and procedures that is going to be able to govern our country honestly and keep our people safe and make them happy and make them prosperous. And that's what I believe that all of us in this great experiment as Guyanese, whether we're living here in the United States or we're living in Guyana or we're living in Canada, the UK, some other place. I know tonight there is some woman in Guyana who's looking at this program or even trying to figure out how she's going to make ends meet for her kids. And there is a teacher sitting here thinking how to plan lessons for our class tomorrow. This is some of the things that we have to work on diligently. And like I said, going back to that roadmap in the Constitution is going to be able to lead us on that path to better govern and better lead our country in a safe and effective way.
Words of wisdom. Colin, thank you so much. I really, as Mr. Pandey said in Trinidad and Tobago, the Constitution should also be there to enhance the livelihood and the happiness of the people in the country. If it's not working, we need to change it. So folks, we have come to the end of our program tonight. I want to thank you again for watching. Please support our program. We have programs here almost, we're trying to get every day of the week. I want to thank Globespan, Noir Singh, Devin for doing a wonderful job for us tonight. And here from New York City, good night and God bless you.